In the headlines, Washington vows to add more pressure on the North Korean regime by targeting its remaining financial links with the world in retaliation for its alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures. North Korea hikes up its rhetoric over the South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises. Oil prices tumbled to a 6-year low as big OPEC producers stand by their decision not to cut output. And Paris remains on high security alert amid more threats of terror attacks. Charlie Hebdo, meanwhile, says it's increasing the number of copies for its first edition since the terror attack to 5 million. Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News live from Seoul. I am Kang Jungho.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with Washington's efforts to further choke North Korea's access to the global financial market.
This move comes in retaliation of Pyongyang's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures. Our Shin Se-min fills us in on how these measures could pinpoint anyone helping the regime.
The U.S. is targeting the remaining financial links North Korea has to the international financial system in retaliation for Pyongyang's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures late last year. Speaking before members of Congress Tuesday, Daniel Glaser, Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing at the U.S. Treasury, said past sanctions had already stopped hundreds of overseas banks from doing business with the North, but said the U.S. could go further.
So we could target any North Korean government agency, we could target any North Korean government official, and then once so targeted, we could apply sanctions with respect to any individual or entity who's providing them in turn material support, or any individual entity that they in turn control.
Glaser said the U.S. is targeting the North Korean elite source of hard currency and its ability to send back cash through Chinese commercial banks to increase the cost for North Korea. And Sung Kim, the top U.S. official on North Korea, who was also at the briefing, said that Pyongyang is losing friends, even its longtime ally, China.
I think what we have seen in our cooperation with China is that China is working with us more effectively and trying to stifle North Korea's dangerous activities. And it's an ongoing effort. I think all of us need to do more, including China.
Regarding the North's recent cozying up with Russia, the U.S. official said Moscow remains committed to the shared goal of denuclearization. Responding to critics who say the sanctions don't go far enough, Kim said the latest measures are very strong and they'll allow Washington to target anyone that tries to provide material support to the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
North Korea has stepped up its criticism of the U.S. after Washington rejected its offer to cancel joint military drills with South Korea in exchange for a temporary suspension of its nuclear test. North Korea has also cautioned the U.S. against meddling in inter-Korean affairs, blaming it for stirring up confrontation on the Korean peninsula. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
After offering to temporarily suspend its nuclear tests for an end to joint South Korea-U.S. military drills, North Korea proposed direct talks with the United States. In a press conference on Tuesday, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN said it was willing to explain the offer, but claimed Washington's rejection reflected its hostility.
The United States has shown once again that they will continue to increase attack military capabilities in the South Korea, while requesting us to not to have our own national defense capabilities.
Seoul and Washington insist their annual training exercises, scheduled for March, are defensive in nature, but Pyongyang sees them as a practice for war. In its state-run Dodong-Sinmun newspaper on Wednesday, North Korea advised the U.S. to step out of inter-Korean affairs. The paper claimed that Washington has always stirred up confrontation whenever there were signs of easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. It called on South Korea to work together with the North to counter the American interference. Analysts see this as part of North Korea's efforts to increase pressure on Seoul. President Park Geunhye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had both expressed their willingness to improve ties in the new year. But while North Korea blames Washington for disturbing the mood for dialogue, it has yet to respond to South Korea's offer for talks, which was made over 2 weeks ago. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, trading volume between the two Koreas hit a record high last year, exceeding $2.1 billion. Most of these items traded were raw materials and finished goods from the inter-Korean industrial complex in Kaesong. In 2013, when the complex was shut down for 6 months due to inter-Korean tensions, the trade volume came down to just over $1 billion.
President Park Geun-hye will pass on a note to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Thursday through a representative of Korea's ruling party. The Saenuri Party Supreme Council member Seo Chung-won is now in Japan for a 3-day visit with a group of Korean lawmakers affiliated with the Korea-Japan Parliamentarians Union. Lawmakers say the message is not in the form of an official letter, but will be delivered in person. Of greatest interest may be whether the message will include any suggestion of a one-on-one summit between the two leaders, which is an event that has still not taken place under the current Park administration. The chairman of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party says the party's goal for the year is to revitalize the economy. In his New Year's address on Wednesday, Kim Moo-sung said Korea should not miss the golden time to boost the economy and push through reforms to avoid Japan-style stagnation. The party chief pointed out the need to reform the public pension system, saying the state budget is running tight. He also said the ruling party will work closely with the opposition to ensure state affairs run smoothly.
Oil prices have tumbled to near a 6-year low on Tuesday as big OPEC producers stood by the group's decision not to cut output. And it looks like oil prices will only continue to fall. Our Connie Lee has more.
It's another drop in oil prices. Crude prices slumped to almost a 6-year low on Tuesday, with Brent trading around the same level as U.S. crude oil. U.S. crude lost 5% at $45.89 a barrel, and Brent plunged 7% to $46.59. Oil prices tumbled after major OPEC producers such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia defended the group's decision not to cut output. Oil prices have dropped 60% in just over 6 months due to rising production such as more U.S. shale oil and weaker demand in Europe and Asia. And if you thought oil prices have gone as low as they can go, think again. Analysts believe the prices will dip even more. In recent days, many global investment banks have cut their oil forecasts, saying the prices need to stay low for longer in order to end a global supply glut. For instance, U.S. bank Goldman Sachs slashed this year's forecast for Brent from about $84 a barrel to about $50. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korea's exports to China are projected to rebound this year after a poor performance in 2014 that saw Korea's shipments to the world's second largest economy dip for the first time in 5 years. Connie Kim has more.
Korean policymakers and exporters alike may be heaving a sigh of relief. The country's exports to China are forecast to rebound this year after falling for the first time in 5 years in 2014. Shipments to China are expected to rise 4.5% to $147 billion, according to industry estimates compiled by KOTRA, a state trade promotion agency. It's welcome news given that China is Korea's biggest trading partner, accounting for more than a quarter of Korea's total exports. This year's rise is expected to be fueled by economic recovery forecasts in the United States, which will boost Beijing's outbound shipments to the U.S. About half of all Korean exports to China are intermediary goods that are used to manufacture finished products that are then shipped off to the U.S. and Europe. Experts also say the free trade agreement between Korea and China that could take effect in the second half of this year will also be a contributing factor.
With the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement, Korean companies will have greater access to the Chinese market where they can target the domestic market.
While sluggish recoveries in China and Europe were mainly to blame, China also improved its own supply capacity of intermediary goods. Experts point out that with the growth of domestic demand in China, Korean intermediary goods will remain competitive in the Chinese market for the time being, but in the longer term, local exporters should come up with more finished goods to stand out from the rest of the pack in China. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A local research institute suggests Korea follows Singapore's lead when it comes to securing overseas investments. The Korea Economic Research Institute says although Singapore's GDP is only a quarter that of Korea's, it's able to compete for foreign direct investment with countries like the U.S. and China due to its flexible labor market, limited regulations, and low taxes. It was ranked 6th by the UN in terms of foreign direct investment in 2013, with a total of $64 billion. Korea, on the other hand, ranked 21st with a total of $12 billion. Samsung Group is set to invest around $46 billion this year for facilities and research and development. A company official says this year's amount is similar to what the company spent last year. Samsung Electronics, the flagship group of the Samsung Group, noted about $22 billion will be spent on its three main sectors: memory chips, display, and mobile. According to marketing analysts, the conglomerate has been steadily increasing its investment from about $39 billion since 2011.
We often talk about growth projections for the Korean economy, but oftentimes the working class here in this country does not seem to feel any growth at all. Kwon-soo explains why.
The days of growth at a breakneck pace are long gone, and yet the Korean economy has shown steady growth in recent years, even after the 2008 global financial crisis. Even so, there are surveys showing that 8 out of 10 Koreans don't think their life is much better than before.
Life is really hard. It's hard for the unwealthy people. Something must be done about the economy.
Statistics Korea says the size of the country's middle class is contracting. Back in 1990, some 75% of the nation's population was categorized as middle class. Now, the percentage has dropped to below 70. The number of people in the lowest income bracket, on the other hand, has jumped from 7 to nearly 12% in the same period. In the past 24 years, Korean households saw their average monthly income grow 3.7 times at current prices. But that's been dwarfed by a 6-fold jump in GDP. And an average household has to cope with a 5-fold hike in costs for fixed expenditures like taxes and insurance during the same period. Some economists say this is due to the nation's companies garnering greater benefits from growth than households. There are other factors too.
When the economy grew by 1% in the past, the employment rate grew by around 0.6%. Today, the rate stands at around 0.3%.
Experts say there needs to be a bigger focus on creating more quality jobs in order to increase consumer spending, which would ultimately lead to higher income for the nation's ordinary people. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
The number of people who found jobs last year in Korea made its biggest leap in 12 years, but that does not necessarily mean Korea's employment situation. The quality of employment is improving. Our Choi-Sun reports.
The number of Koreans who found jobs in 2014 jumped a 12-year high.
Statistics Korea says nearly 25.6 million people found work last year, up more than 530,000 compared to the year 2013. Looking back at the past 5 years, the yearly increase in the number of people with new jobs had expanded significantly. The country's employment rate also gained slightly to reach a 17-year high of 60.2%. By industry, new jobs were created in manufacturing and health and welfare, while fewer jobs were gained in agriculture, fisheries, and finance. However, experts say a large portion of the newly employed were previously inactive in the economy. Many of them are in their 50s and 60s and have returned to the workforce in temporary positions. That, coupled with a decline in the number of jobs for people in their 30s, shows that Korea's job market remains unstable. In fact, the unemployment rate was the highest for young people from the ages of 15 to 29, jumping to 9%. The unemployment rate has also climbed steadily in recent years. What's even more grim for this group is that 1 out of every 5 young people who found jobs started with contracts of less than a year. A recent OECD report said only 11% of temporary workers in Korea secured permanent employment after a year, and the rest either remained or were let go. 최유선, Arirang News.
The French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo has released its first issue to the world since the terror attack on its Paris office last Wednesday.
For more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, this past week has been a roller coaster of emotions with the deadly shootings and the massive rallies of solidarity that followed. Well, what's been the reaction to this issue?
Well, it's already sold out across France due to overwhelming demand. The editors have decided to increase the print run to 5 million copies, with the proceeds going to the victims' families. The show's support, however, comes as the al-Qaeda group in Yemen has claimed responsibility for the Paris massacre. The leadership of the jihadist network says it financed and ordered the attack on Charlie Hebdo that left 12 people dead. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Paris remains on high alert, with armed police and soldiers stepping up inspections around institutions, public places, media outlets, and Jewish schools. More threats of terror attacks have emerged in the country, including one from an al-Qaeda offshoot in North Africa. It threatened to carry out more strikes on French soil if the satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo publishes the latest edition, which has a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad on the front cover. The newspaper has already unveiled the front page of the January 14th edition. It shows a caricature of the Prophet holding a sign that says, "I am Charlie" in French, under the banner, "All is forgiven."
Then there was nothing else but that, this idea of drawing Mohammed, "I am Charlie," and I looked at him, he was crying, and over it I wrote, "All is forgiven." I cried, and it was the front page.
French Muslim leaders urge their community to remain calm and respect the right to freedom of expression. Prime Minister Emmanuel Valls said France was at war against terrorism and extremism, not against Islam. The Muslim community is France's second largest religious group. Meanwhile, separate ceremonies were held in Paris and Jerusalem for the victims of last week's terror attacks. President François Hollande led a solemn ceremony paying tribute to 3 police officers who were killed in the line of duty. In Israel, thousands mourned the passing of 4 Jewish Frenchmen gunned down in an attack at a kosher supermarket on Friday. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And turning to the U.S., President Barack Obama has vowed to strengthen the nation's cybersecurity laws in the wake of the hacking attack on the U.S. military Central Command. Speaking on Tuesday, Obama proposed legislation that would crack down on hackers that prey on the public or private sectors. That means new powers to prosecute cybercrime, a threat that the president described as an urgent and ongoing danger.
We're proposing to update the authorities that law enforcement uses to go after cyber criminals. The bottom line, we want cyber criminals to feel the full force of American justice, because they are doing as much damage, if not more these days, as folks who are involved in more conventional crime.
The White House hopes to build momentum for the legislative move ahead of a cybersecurity summit, which will be held in Silicon Valley next month. And in the latest update in the recovery mission for AirAsia Flight 8501, a Singaporean Navy ship has located the main body of the passenger jet that crashed in the Java Sea last month. In a Facebook post on Wednesday, Singapore's defense minister revealed images of the plane's fuselage that was taken by an underwater vehicle. The photos show part of the wing and pieces of the AirAsia slogan painted on the exterior hull. Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency has confirmed the discovery and is now redirecting divers to the crash site. It's believed that most of the missing victims are trapped inside the wreckage there. Only 48 bodies have been recovered so far. 162 people were on board the airliner when it lost contact on December 28th. And finally shifting to Japan, where Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet has approved the largest ever defense budget, adding up to $42 billion. Japanese Defense Minister Gen Nakatani said the record funds are needed to deal with what he called the changing situation around Japan. The spending plan calls for scores of new aircraft, stealth fighters, and vehicles, which appear to be aimed at guarding maritime borders. The year-on-year trend reflects Prime Minister Abe's push to build a more active military and reinterpret the country's pacifist constitution. Meanwhile, China and Japan are trying to ease tensions over a disputed island chain in the East China Sea. The two countries agreed to set up a special hotline to prevent clashes in this area. Not a lot of details have been released, but the two sides agreed to operate the hotline soon, marking their first discussion on the issue in more than 2.5 years. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now, and I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. Starting with our ongoing coverage of the Asian Cup, Group E was in action on Wednesday in the earlier match. North Korea squared off against Saudi Arabia. With a loss apiece, it was a must-win match for both teams, and the North Koreans were first to score, but Saudi Arabia equalized before the half. And later, Saudi striker Al-Salawi struck twice in 2-minute span to put it all away. And with that, Saudi Arabia keeps its run going while North Korea is out with 2 losses. Meanwhile, the first team to advance from Group B is China after 2 goals in the second half neutralized the opening score by Uzbekistan. Saudi Arabia and Uzbekistan will meet on Sunday to determine who will join China in the next round. Moving on, Kang Jungho has left for Pittsburgh for a physical on Thursday and Friday, seen as the final step before signing with the Pirates. At the airport, he said that he's looking forward to the challenge of playing in the majors and raised a lot of eyebrows when he said he could outplay shortstop Jordy Mercer if given the chance. Now, if the projected 4-year, $16 million contract deal is finalized, Kang will have to compete for a spot in the crowded infield and on the batting order. Heading to the doubleheader in the KBL, the first game takes us to the tip-off in Seoul. The SK Knights faced off against the Goyang Orions. And the #1 SK Knights are the aggressors early before the Orions get close by the fourth quarter. It's a good night for the SK Knights as they shut the lid on the comeback. Meanwhile, in Incheon, the ET Land Elephants defeat Anyang KGC after stampeding in the final period. With the 35-point barrage there, they get the come-from-behind win. Over to pro volleyball. There were also 2 matches on the night. First, to the ladies in Hwaseong. The IBK Altos hosted KGC. And the visitors soar ahead 2-0 before the Altos stand tall. Destiny and Park Jung-ah lead the attack as IBK makes the comeback. And to the men in Cheonan, the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers stunned the Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs, snapping their winning streak at 8. It's a big boost for the Skywalkers, who get their first win from the league's top team this season. And that wraps it up for now. Your weather's up next. Have a good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. At the moment, it is raining down in the southern regions, including Jeju, and it looks like up to 10 millimeters may fall through later tonight. While the seasonal average temperature at this time of the year is about 2 degrees, but tomorrow's daytime high should peak at a warm 8 degrees. Other than that, cloudy skies will give way to clear conditions for most regions. However, about 5 millimeters of rain is expected for the eastern coast, plus 1 to 3 centimeters of snow may fall on the mountains of the Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. Looking ahead, snow or showers are in store nationwide on Friday, and it looks like this will pull down numbers back to seasonal averages. On to Thursday's readings, Seoul and Daegu hit 8, while Gwangju peaks at 9. On to other regions, Jeju makes it to 9, Dokdo hit 6, Mount Kumgang -2. That's all I have for you now, but more updates coming up after midnight.
That's primetime news for this Wednesday. Thanks for watching. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Jungho. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.